The gunshot echoed before I even felt the impact. 1 second, I was standing there, demanding answers from Amanda's lover, and the next, a hot, blinding pain tore through my side. I staggered back, barely able to comprehend what had just happened, my mind reeling from the searing agony that radiated from the bullet wound. He'd shot me. This smug, arrogant bastard had shot me, and Amanda, my own wife, stood by watching, her face devoid of any emotion, any remorse. She didn't scream, didn't even flinch. She just watched me crumble to the ground, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience, something to be swept aside. Her gaze was cold, detached, like she was finally rid of a burden. As my vision dimmed and I felt consciousness slipping away, his mocking words filtered through the haze of pain. If your life means anything to you, you'd better accept the situation and stay out of my way. Your wife is mine now, and I like it that way. That was the last thing I remembered before everything went black. When I regained consciousness, it was to the sterile white of a hospital ceiling and the faint smell of antiseptic. My side throbbed, every breath sending a fresh wave of pain radiating through my body. It was disorienting, piecing together the events that had landed me here. Bit by bit, the reality of what had happened hit me: Amanda's betrayal, her lover's brutal arrogance, the shot that could have taken my life. And then, I heard voices just outside the door, muffled but unmistakable. I'm not worried about him anymore, Liv. He got what he deserved. He was suffocating, always needing something from me. I was done with him long before all this happened. Amanda's voice, sharp and unapologetic, sliced through the air. Each word was like a fresh wound, more brutal than the bullet itself. She sounded completely detached, as if I were a problem she'd finally solved. This wasn't the voice of the woman I'd shared a life with, it was the voice of a stranger, a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle she was glad to have removed. My daughter, Olivia, responded, her voice trembling with shock and disbelief. But, Mom, he's my dad. How can you just? I mean, he's in there, hurt, because of this. How can you be so cold about it? Amanda's answer was a bitter laugh. Olivia, grow up. You don't know what it's like to be trapped in a marriage that's long dead. He was holding me back. And let's face it, this is the best thing that could have happened for everyone. He'll get over it, or he won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Every syllable, every breath she took to say those words, turned my stomach. She didn't just betray me, she watched me bleed out and felt nothing. No guilt, no hesitation, as if she'd written me off long ago. And now she was erasing me entirely, with all the callousness of someone throwing out old trash. I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me, years of trust, of memories, shattered in the cold reality of her words. She had planned this, stood by as her lover tried to kill me, and didn't even flinch. A new resolve grew in me as I lay there, every beat of my heart pounding with fresh purpose. She might have tried to erase me, to brush me aside, but I wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, Amanda's callous words ringing in my ears. The reality was suffocating, each word twisting like a knife, reopening wounds I'd thought would only exist in nightmares. She wasn't just indifferent, she was reveling in it, treating my pain as though it were some joke, some minor inconvenience in her new, improved life. I tried to sit up, pushing through the pain that shot up my side. Every movement reminded me of what Amanda's lover had done, what she had allowed him to do. My mind kept returning to the way she'd looked at me as I'd fallen, her face devoid of emotion, as if she were watching a scene in a movie, not her husband lying in agony. I couldn't let this go. Not now, not ever. There was no moving forward without confronting her, without making her face what she'd done to me, to our family. As I swung my legs off the bed, I realized the tubes attached to me were still dripping medication into my veins. A nurse stepped in, her eyes widening as she saw me moving. "Mr. Lawson, please, you shouldn't be trying to get up yet. Your injuries. I cut her off, voice gruff and filled with a resolve I didn't even realize I still had. I'm leaving. She started to protest, but the fire in my eyes must have convinced her otherwise. After some insistence and paperwork, I was finally released. They didn't know the whole story, and I wasn't about to share it. This wasn't a matter for doctors or nurses, it was between Amanda and me now. The ride home was a blur, every pulse of pain in my side a reminder of the betrayal, of the way Amanda had stood by and let this happen. By the time I reached our house, a simmering fury had taken hold of me, giving me the strength to push through the throbbing ache in my side. The house was quiet when I opened the door, but I knew she was there. Her car was parked in the driveway, as though nothing had changed, as though her betrayal was just another part of her daily routine. I found her in the kitchen, her back to me, nonchalantly washing dishes, as if the man she'd left for dead wasn't standing in the doorway, watching her. Amanda, I said, my voice barely more than a growl. She turned, surprised for a split second, but then that surprise shifted into something else, a smirk, a tiny, twisted smile that she didn't bother to hide. She crossed her arms, leaning back against the counter, unbothered. Well, look who's back, she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. I figured you'd take longer to crawl out of the hospital. The fury inside me surged. I took a step closer, struggling to keep my voice steady. Why, Amanda? Why did you do this? She let out a laugh, cold and dismissive. Why? Because I was tired, Michael. Tired of your sad little attempts to keep me tethered to a life I outgrew years ago. You were like a ghost, haunting me, clinging on when I didn't want you anymore. Her words slammed into me, each one more vicious than the last. There was no remorse, no shame. She didn't even attempt to explain herself in a way that could soften the blow. Instead, she seemed to relish the opportunity to twist the knife even further. And him? I asked, barely able to get the words out. The guy who shot me? You just stood there and let it happen? She shrugged. He was just making a point. You're in the way, Michael. You've always been in the way. I figured you'd understand that by now. The bile rose in my throat, the betrayal crystallizing into something sharp and dangerous. I took a shaky breath, grounding myself, refusing to let her see just how deeply she was cutting into me. I'd come here looking for answers, but instead, all I'd found was a hollow, heartless shell where my wife had once been. You're a real piece of work, Amanda, I said, voice trembling. I thought I knew you. I thought there was still something worth saving. But I see now that you're nothing but. She cut me off, holding up a hand. Save it, Michael. I'm not interested in your hurt feelings. You're in the way of my life, and you're not my problem anymore. Something snapped inside me. I'd always been the calm one, the forgiving one, the man who tried to make things work, who'd been patient through every difficult phase. But this wasn't a rough patch. This was something else entirely, something monstrous. I'd been cast aside, mocked, and now, abandoned. She'd drawn the line, made her choice, and it was clear where I stood in her new world. As I turned to leave, she spoke again, her voice echoing like a twisted benediction. Goodbye, Michael. Try not to make a mess of things on your way out. Her words followed me, like the final nails sealing the coffin of everything we'd once shared. The pain was unbearable, but I forced myself out of that house, out of the wreckage of a life that had been stolen from me piece by piece. This wasn't over. She thought she'd broken me, that I'd disappear quietly. But Amanda had no idea who she was dealing with. If she wanted a fight, she'd just found one. The drive away from the house was a blur, rage twisting inside me like a live wire. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed distance, a chance to think, to process everything. Amanda's voice echoed in my mind, her cold words repeating like a twisted mantra, You're in the way, Michael. You're not my problem anymore. My thoughts spiraled as I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets. I could hardly wrap my head around it, Amanda's complete lack of remorse, her dismissal of everything we'd built together. The woman I'd once loved was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to view me as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I'd spent years of my life with her, built a family with her, sacrificed for her, and now it was clear that none of it mattered to her. It was late when I finally pulled over, parking on an empty overlook with a view of the distant city lights. I sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. Memories flooded in, Amanda laughing, Amanda holding our newborn daughter, Amanda promising me forever. But those images felt tainted now, as if they belonged to someone else. The woman in my memories wasn't the same person who had stood in that kitchen, taunting me as though I were a stranger. The shock and betrayal morphed into something darker, something that fueled me. I couldn't just let this go. I'd been attacked, humiliated, left for dead. Her lover had crossed the line, and Amanda had let him. They both thought they could erase me from their lives like some inconvenience. But I wasn't about to disappear that easily. My phone buzzed, jolting me back to the present. It was a message from my daughter, Olivia. Olivia, Dad, where are you? Are you okay? My heart tightened. Olivia. She was the one good thing left, my anchor. And she was caught in the middle of this nightmare. She'd seen through Amanda's lies, seen the cruelty in her mother that I had missed for so long. I took a shaky breath, unsure of how much to tell her, or if she could even handle it. I'm okay, Liv. Just needed some air. The response came back almost immediately. Olivia, can we meet? I need to talk to you about everything. I hesitated, knowing that any conversation with Olivia would inevitably drag her further into this mess. But she had already seen so much, and if anyone deserved to know the truth, it was her. I agreed, telling her to meet me at a nearby diner, a quiet place we'd gone to for late-night milkshakes back when she was little. It felt safe, familiar, a small piece of the past that hadn't yet been tainted. When she arrived, I saw the worry etched on her face, her usual bright expression replaced by a guarded look. She slid into the booth across from me, her eyes searching mine, as if trying to piece together the man she knew with the stranger her mother had painted me to be. Dad, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I don't understand what's happening. Mom, she's like a different person. She talks about you like you're nothing, and it's like she doesn't even care that you're hurt. I nodded, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. Liv, there's a lot you don't know. Things I didn't even know until recently. She bit her lip, her expression hardening. You mean about him? The guy who shot you? A lump formed in my throat, and I struggled to hold back the surge of anger and pain. Yes. Him. Amanda's been seeing him behind my back. And when I confronted her about it, things went south fast. He decided I was an obstacle, something that needed to be taken care of. The words hung between us, the weight of them heavy and suffocating. Olivia's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and betrayal. And she just let it happen? I nodded, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. Yes, Liv. She stood by, watched it all go down, and when I woke up in that hospital, I heard her telling you I deserved it. Olivia's face paled, her hands curling into fists. I don't recognize her, Dad. She's like a stranger. How could she do this to us? I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. I don't have an answer, Liv. But I know one thing, she's not getting away with it. I'm not going to let her and that man walk away as if nothing happened. They tried to erase me, but I'm still here. And I'm not backing down. She nodded, her jaw set in determination. Good. She can't just destroy everything and expect us to stand by and watch. For the first time since I'd woken up in that hospital, I felt a flicker of hope. Olivia was with me. I wasn't alone in this. I had lost so much, but I still had her, still had someone who saw me for who I was, not the villain Amanda had tried to paint. We sat in silence for a while, the gravity of the situation settling over us. Then Olivia spoke, her voice steady. "What are we going to do, Dad?" I looked at her, my mind already forming a plan. "First, we're going to protect ourselves. Make sure that no matter what happens, we come out of this with our dignity intact. And then," I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Then, we'll make sure they know that they can't get away with this. Not without consequences." Olivia nodded, her eyes fierce. She was strong, stronger than I'd ever given her credit for. And together, we would face this. Whatever Amanda and her lover threw at us, we wouldn't back down. This was just the beginning. The days that followed felt like a strange, tense calm before an inevitable storm. Amanda was still in the house, going about her life as if nothing had happened, while I stayed in a small rented apartment a few miles away. I couldn't bear to be under the same roof as her, not while I was piecing together my next move. Olivia and I kept in close contact, meeting in secret to talk about what would come next, sharing updates and formulating a plan. One evening, she showed up at the apartment with a flash drive in her hand, her eyes blazing with determination. "Dad," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I went through Mom's things. Her laptop, her files, all of it. She's been careful, but not careful enough." She held up the flash drive. "I found messages between her and him. Messages where they talk about getting rid of you." A chill went down my spine. "You mean they planned this?" She nodded, her face hardened with anger. "They were talking about you like you were some obstacle in the way of their new life. She wasn't hiding it, Dad. She was practically flaunting it. They joked about you, laughed at how easy it was to make you look like a fool." I took the flash drive from her, feeling the weight of it, as if it held more than just digital files. It was proof. Proof of Amanda's betrayal, of her cruelty, of her plan to erase me from her life as if I'd never mattered. "Olivia," I said, my voice trembling. "You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to get involved." She shook her head fiercely. "No, Dad. I'm already involved, whether I like it or not. And I won't let her do this to us. Not after everything you've done for her, for us." We spent the next few hours going through the contents of that flash drive. The messages were brutal, each line dripping with Amanda's contempt, her new lover's mockery. They talked about how they'd set me up to look like I'd lost control, like I was a paranoid, desperate man clinging to a marriage that was long dead. It was a narrative she'd crafted to make me look unhinged, to justify everything they had planned. But with these messages, the truth was finally laid bare. She couldn't lie her way out of this. The flash drive was my leverage, my safeguard. And it was a reminder that I still had a chance to take back control. A few days later, I decided it was time to confront Amanda, this time on my terms. Olivia and I set up a meeting in a neutral location, a quiet park we used to take her to as a child. It was empty that time of day, with only the occasional jogger or dog walker passing by. I waited there, steeling myself, feeling the weight of the flash drive in my pocket. When Amanda arrived, she wore a look of mild irritation, as if I'd inconvenienced her by asking to meet. Her eyes barely flickered with recognition, a coldness that was both unsettling and infuriating. "What do you want, Michael?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I thought you were done with all this." "I think you know exactly what I want," I replied, my tone sharp. "I know everything, Amanda. I know about you and him, the lies, the setup. I know what you were planning for me." She rolled her eyes, unbothered. "So? It's done, Michael. You're out of my life, just like I wanted. Why keep dragging this out?" I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it up. Because I have this. All of your messages. All of the proof that you were behind this. Every cruel word, every plan to get rid of me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She tried to mask it with a smirk, but her voice wavered slightly. And what do you think that will get you? You think anyone will believe you? You've already made a mess of everything. I took a step closer, keeping my voice low, controlled. This isn't about who believes me, Amanda. This is about consequences. I'm not some pawn you can just discard. You crossed the line, and now you're going to face what you've done. Her face twisted into an expression of contempt. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Always the good guy, always the one doing things by the book. Newsflash, Michael, it's that very weakness that made me despise you. You don't have the guts to do anything about this. You'll take this proof, and you'll do nothing, just like you always have. I looked her in the eyes, letting her see that I was no longer the man she thought she knew. You don't know me as well as you think, Amanda. And you definitely don't know what I'm capable of anymore. For a moment, she looked uncertain, as if she were seeing me clearly for the first time. She swallowed, her mask of indifference slipping, if only for a second. But she quickly recovered, tossing her head back and laughing, a hollow sound that echoed through the empty park. You're pathetic, she spat. Clinging to your last scraps of dignity. Go ahead, take your little flash drive and try to make me pay. See where it gets you. She turned on her heel, walking away as if she'd won, as if her words had defeated me. But I wasn't going to be swayed by her insults. She might have thought she'd broken me, but I was far from broken. I had the proof, I had Olivia's support, and I had something that Amanda could never take from me, resolve. As I watched her disappear down the path, a grim satisfaction settled over me. She'd played her hand, underestimated me, believed that I'd go down quietly. But Amanda was about to learn that I was no longer the man she could manipulate. She'd lit this fire, and now she would face the consequences. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as I turned to leave, I knew exactly what my next move would be. With the evidence secured and my resolve solidified, I knew the next step was to protect myself legally. Amanda had gone so far beyond betrayal that this was now about survival, not just for me, but for Olivia too. I couldn't let her and that man she called her lover walk away without facing the consequences. They'd nearly destroyed my life, and I wouldn't let them do the same to my daughter. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rachel Carter who came highly recommended. As I laid out my story, her eyebrows knitted together in a mix of disbelief and anger. She listened intently, her face impassive but her eyes burning with focus as I explained the details, handing over the flash drive Olivia had given me. When I finished, Rachel leaned back in her chair, her gaze unwavering. Michael, this is an unbelievable betrayal, to put it mildly. But this evidence is powerful. You have solid ground to press charges, both for the assault and for what amounts to a conspiracy between your wife and her lover. The word conspiracy hit me hard, but that's exactly what it was. They'd planned this, orchestrated every part of it, and Amanda had been just as guilty as the man who'd pulled the trigger. Rachel continued, the flash drive gives us the foundation we need. However, we'll need to act quickly and quietly. If they catch wind that we're gathering evidence, they might attempt to destroy any remaining proof or twist the narrative. We'll file for a restraining order to keep him away from you, and we'll begin divorce proceedings. This will hit them both hard. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. This was it, the first real strike in a battle that would either bring Amanda down or push her to her breaking point. Do it, I said, my voice resolute. Whatever it takes, I want them to pay for what they've done. Rachel nodded. Understood. And, Michael, be prepared. People like Amanda don't go down easily. She may try to retaliate, manipulate, or play the victim. You'll need to stay focused. With a grim nod, I agreed, knowing that Rachel was right. Amanda wouldn't let go easily. But I was ready for whatever she threw at me. She'd underestimated me once, and I wasn't about to let her do it again. The next day, Olivia came over to the apartment, bringing me an envelope that had been delivered to the house. I opened it, and inside was a single piece of paper, the words scrawled in Amanda's handwriting. "Give it up, Michael. This is just going to get uglier for you if you keep pushing. You don't know what you're up against." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. She was warning me, or maybe trying to intimidate me. But the only thing her words accomplished was hardening my resolve. She thought she could still control me, still make me back down, but she couldn't have been more wrong. Olivia saw the note and shook her head, disgust flashing in her eyes. "She's scared, Dad. That's why she's sending these threats. She knows she's losing control." "I know," I replied, folding the note and setting it aside. "But she's about to find out just how much control she's lost." With Rachel's guidance, we filed the necessary documents swiftly, initiating the restraining order against her lover and setting the divorce process in motion. By the end of the week, Amanda was served, and the reality of the situation would hit her full force. I knew she'd be livid. I could almost imagine her reaction, the fury, the indignation. She'd expected me to stay silent, to wither away while she moved on with her new life. But the game had changed, and she was finally on the defensive. That weekend, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. I recognized the voice immediately. It was her lover, the same voice that had taunted me after he'd shot me, smug and dripping with confidence. "Michael," he drawled, "I hear you've been busy. Trying to make things difficult for Amanda and me, huh? That's a dangerous game you're playing." I held back my rage, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "This isn't a game. It's your turn to pay for what you did. Both of you." He laughed, a hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "You think you're a big man now, don't you? Because you hired a lawyer, filed a few papers? Listen, I could make this whole thing go away with a single call. I'm giving you one last chance, Michael. Drop it. Go back to your miserable life, and let Amanda go." "Or what?" I challenged, feeling a reckless anger rise in me. "You'll shoot me again? Go ahead. This time, you won't get away with it." There was a pause, and for a brief moment, I thought he might back down. But instead, he lowered his voice, his tone deadly. "You're playing with fire, Michael. Walk away, or you'll regret it. And as for that daughter of yours, she's awfully loyal, isn't she? Such a shame if something happened to her because of your stubbornness." The threat against Olivia ignited something fierce in me. "If you touch her, I swear." But the line went dead before I could finish, leaving me holding the phone in a white-knuckled grip, seething with a rage I'd never felt before. He'd crossed a line, threatening Olivia. That was the last straw. The next morning, I went straight to Rachel's office, the call fresh in my mind, my resolve steeled. "He threatened Olivia," I told her, anger boiling under every word. "This has gone beyond betrayal. He made it personal. I want to do whatever it takes to make him pay." Rachel looked at me, her expression hard. "Then we'll bring the full weight of the law down on him. With his threat documented, we'll build a case that goes beyond just the assault and conspiracy. But, Michael, be prepared, this will get messy. People like him don't back down quietly." "I don't care," I said, barely holding back the anger. "He's taken everything from me. I'm not backing down until he pays for every single thing he's done." Rachel nodded, her determination mirroring my own. "Then let's get to work. If he wants a fight, he's about to get one." As I left her office, I felt a surge of purpose. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to Amanda's betrayal or her lover's threats. I was taking back my life, piece by piece. They'd thrown their worst at me, but I was still standing. And now, I was ready to bring the fight to them. The days that followed were a whirlwind of strategy meetings, gathering evidence, and preparing for the legal war ahead. Rachel was relentless, tearing through every shred of information we had on Amanda and her lover, digging up financial records, correspondence, and any scrap of leverage she could find. I threw myself into the process, determined to see this through to the end. They'd threatened Olivia, tried to erase me, and now they would face every consequence that was coming to them. One evening, while I was reviewing documents in my apartment, Olivia called. Her voice was shaky, panicked in a way that set my nerves on edge. "Dad," she said, barely able to keep her voice steady. "He came by the house. Mom's boyfriend. He was looking for you." My stomach dropped. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to keep my own voice calm. "What happened, Liv? Are you okay?" "Yes," she replied, but there was an edge of fear in her tone. "He didn't hurt me, but he wasn't exactly subtle. He told Mom that you'd gone too far, and that it was time to teach you a lesson." Mom just laughed, like it was some game they were playing. "She's totally under his control, Dad. It's like she's gone." Hearing that twisted something inside me, a mixture of fear for Olivia's safety and fury at Amanda's complicity. This man was dangerous, more dangerous than I'd fully realized, and Amanda was all in, standing by his side as he pushed further and further into this twisted game. "Listen to me, Olivia," I said, keeping my voice firm. "Stay away from the house. I don't want you anywhere near them. Come stay with me for now. Rachel is working on the restraining order, and we're making progress. But I need you safe. Promise me you won't go back there." There was a pause before she finally whispered, "I promise, Dad." The next morning, I met with Rachel, updating her on the latest threat. Her face hardened, and she made some calls, her voice icy as she insisted on the urgency of our restraining order against Amanda's lover. She informed me that she'd also reached out to the authorities with the new information on his threats against me and Olivia, and that additional charges might be forthcoming. "Michael," she said, looking me in the eye. "We're going to bring him down. But I need you to stay vigilant. He's becoming more reckless, and that makes him dangerous." I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me. "I understand. But I won't let him keep us living in fear. I want him to know that he can't control us." Rachel nodded. "We're on the right track. Just stay strong a little longer." But the calm didn't last. 2 nights later, I was jolted awake by a loud pounding at my apartment door. Heart racing, I grabbed my phone and looked through the peephole, half expecting to see him standing there with that same smug grin he'd worn when he shot me. Instead, it was Amanda, looking frantic and disheveled, her eyes darting nervously up and down the hallway. Against my better judgment, I opened the door, but only partway, keeping my guard up. "What are you doing here, Amanda?" She pushed her way in, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to see someone following her. "Michael, I need your help," she whispered, her voice trembling. I almost laughed. The irony was too rich. After everything she'd done, after orchestrating my near death, she had the nerve to show up here asking for help? "Help?" I repeated, barely able to keep the anger from my voice. "You stood by and let that man nearly kill me. You threatened our daughter, Amanda. And now you want help?" She looked down, wringing her hands, her face pale and anxious. I didn't think it would go this far. He's out of control, Michael. He's saying things, making threats, talking about finishing the job. I thought I could handle him, but I was wrong." The realization hit me like a punch. She was afraid, truly afraid. It was the first time I'd seen any hint of remorse in her, and though part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, a sliver of pity crept in. She was finally realizing the price of her betrayal. "And what do you expect me to do about it, Amanda?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You chose him. You let him do this to me, to us. You made this bed, and now you're lying in it." She looked up, desperation in her eyes. "Michael, I made a mistake. I know that now. But he's dangerous. He's unpredictable. I think he wants to hurt you again. Or worse." The anger inside me roared, but I kept my voice low, controlled. "You're scared now because he's turned on you. You think he'll protect you as long as you're useful to him. But people like him don't care about loyalty or love, Amanda. You're disposable to him, just like you thought I was disposable." Tears filled her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I used to know, the woman I'd shared a life with before all of this. "Please, Michael. You have to help me. I don't know what he'll do." I shook my head, bitterness lacing my words. "I tried to save you once, Amanda. You turned your back on me. I'm not putting my life or my daughter's life on the line for you again." She crumpled, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. But I didn't waver. I wouldn't let her manipulate me with guilt or tears. She'd made her choice, and she'd done it without a second thought. But now that her fantasy was crumbling, she wanted someone to pick up the pieces. As I turned away from her, I heard her whisper, "I'm sorry, Michael. For everything." I stopped, looking back at her one last time. "Sorry doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't make me forget the lies, the betrayal. And it doesn't make me forget that you stood by while he tried to take my life." Without another word, I opened the door, signaling for her to leave. She looked at me, a broken shell of the woman I once loved, and then, wordlessly, she slipped out into the night. After she left, I sat there in silence, processing everything. Her visit had confirmed one thing: her lover was losing control. And if he was threatening her, it meant he was desperate, willing to do anything to protect himself. I couldn't let my guard down, not for a second. The next day, I relayed everything to Rachel, and she wasted no time notifying the authorities about the heightened threat. Restraining orders, legal action, and additional security measures were put in place. I was ready to protect myself and Olivia, no matter the cost. Amanda's choices had set this all in motion, and now her world was unraveling. I wasn't sure what would come next, but one thing was certain: her lover wouldn't go down without a fight. But neither would I. I was ready for whatever came next, and this time, I would make sure he regretted ever thinking he could control my life. The tension was almost unbearable. Days passed, each one dragging as I awaited the next move, wondering when Amanda's lover would strike. Olivia stayed close, avoiding any contact with her mother or her mother's boyfriend. She was my only anchor, my only real connection to the life I'd once known. Rachel continued to press forward with our case, gathering every piece of evidence she could find, and working closely with law enforcement to make sure we were prepared for any retaliation. But it didn't take long before Amanda's lover made his move. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I picked up, expecting another taunt or threat, but instead, I heard the frantic voice of Amanda. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own panicked breathing. "He's coming for you. He knows where you are. I don't know how he found out, but he's coming." Before I could even respond, I heard a crash in the background, followed by Amanda's terrified scream, and then the line went dead. I felt a chill run through me. For all her betrayal, all the pain she'd caused, Amanda was still the mother of my child, someone I'd once loved. And if her lover had finally turned on her, that meant he was more unhinged than even I'd realized. I immediately called Rachel, filling her in. She urged me to contact the police and stay put until help arrived. But something inside me wouldn't let me sit still. My mind raced, imagining the worst. If he was after her, there was no telling what he would do. Amanda was in real danger, and, despite everything, I couldn't stand by and let him hurt her. I grabbed my car keys, leaving a message for Olivia to stay safe and avoid the house at all costs. I had no idea what I would find when I got there, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The house was dark when I arrived, save for the faint glow coming from the living room. I parked a few houses down, hoping he wouldn't notice me right away, and crept toward the front window. Inside, I could see Amanda standing alone, visibly shaken, her phone in one hand, while her lover loomed over her, his face twisted in fury. "You think you can just betray me?" he snarled, his voice low but filled with venom. "You think you can just run back to your little family after everything we planned?" Amanda tried to back away, her voice pleading. "Please. I didn't mean to cross you. I just need out. This has gone too far. I never wanted Michael dead." He laughed, a hollow, sinister sound. "Too late for that, Amanda. You're in this as deep as I am, and if you think you can just walk away, you're dead wrong." My fists clenched, a fury rising in me like nothing I'd ever felt. It wasn't just about Amanda anymore, it was about the man standing in my home, threatening the lives of the people I'd once considered my family, the man who'd nearly ended me. This time, there was no escape for him. I couldn't wait for the police. I couldn't risk him hurting Amanda, not before I'd had a chance to end this myself. I moved to the front door, the adrenaline pushing me forward, and with one forceful kick, I burst into the house, startling them both. He whipped around, eyes narrowing as he saw me. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," he sneered. "Back for another beating, Michael?" I stood my ground, my voice steady. "You should have stayed gone after the first time. You're done here. You don't get to terrorize anyone else." He smirked, stepping closer, his hand slipping toward the waistband of his jeans where I could see the outline of a gun. "You think you're some kind of hero? Amanda made her choice, and it wasn't you. She belongs to me now. Always has, always will." Amanda shrank back, her face pale as she glanced between us. I could see the regret in her eyes, but there was no time for pity. This was about survival, hers, mine, and Olivia's. The tension was electric, each second stretching as he weighed his options. I knew he was itching to go for his gun, but he hesitated, likely considering the consequences of a second assault. I took advantage of his hesitation, lunging forward, grabbing his arm before he could draw the weapon. We struggled, each of us wrestling for control. The fury in me lent strength I didn't know I had, and before he could react, I twisted his arm back, wrenching the gun from his grip. He cried out in pain, his bravado slipping as he realized he'd lost the upper hand. "Enough," I spat, my voice barely above a whisper, but the intensity left no room for argument. "You're finished." Amanda backed away, her face a mask of shock and fear. She'd never seen this side of me, the side that had been pushed to his limit, who had nothing left to lose. The man who had once been her husband was gone, replaced by someone who'd been hardened by her betrayal. I kept my grip tight on his arm, forcing him to the ground, and pressed the call button on my phone. Moments later, the sound of sirens filled the air, flashing lights illuminating the street outside. I knew it was over. He'd finally run out of time. The police arrived, taking him into custody. Amanda, still shaken, watched as they led him away, her face pale and expression unreadable. For a brief moment, she looked at me, her eyes filled with something that might have been regret, or perhaps just relief that the nightmare was ending. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. She'd made her choice, and it had led her down this path. As they took him away, Rachel arrived, having been notified of the incident. She walked over to me, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It's over, Michael," she said quietly. He won't be able to hurt you, Olivia, or Amanda again. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything settle over me. It was over, but the scars would remain. I turned to Amanda one last time, meeting her gaze. "Goodbye, Amanda," I said, my voice hollow. "This is where we part ways, for good." She opened her mouth as if to respond, but the words never came. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, a stranger in the life I'd once known. It was a painful end, but it was an ending nonetheless. That night, back at my apartment, Olivia hugged me tightly, relief in her embrace. We had survived the storm, and for the first time in months, there was a sense of peace. I knew it wouldn't be easy to rebuild, but we had each other, and that was enough. As I sat in the quiet of my apartment, I reflected on everything that had happened. Amanda's betrayal had shattered my life, but it had also forced me to see the strength within myself, the courage to fight for what mattered. And now, with the threat finally behind us, I could move forward, wiser and stronger. The nightmare was over, and in its place was the promise of a new beginning.